Hi Abby. We will just wait a few more minutes just for a few people to get logged in and start watching, and then we will start with the questioning. Hi everyone that's just joined. We'll get started in a few more minutes. We'll just wait till about 3 minutes past and then we'll get started. How's everyone's day going so far? Oh lovely, I wish I was on holiday. It must be very tough, especially coming back to this weather, but don't worry about it, you'll get used to it again. Just another minute or so and then we'll start. Okay, perfect. We'll get started, and if people want to join in throughout, then they can. So I'm Lucia. I'm one of the sports therapists here at On Your Game, and today I'm going to be discussing the menstrual cycle and how it affects sports performance. Generally, the menstrual cycle is quite a taboo subject. Not many females generally feel comfortable talking about it. With some of my friends, they won't even discuss anything to do with it. So in terms of sport, it's quite a big thing and people don't quite understand just how many impacts it does generally have on people day to day, and then also professional athletes as well. Obviously there are many differences between male and female athletes, and just male and females in general. One of the biggest ones is the menstrual cycle, due to women having hormonal differences and physical changes throughout the process and throughout the journey. Generally men are normally seen to be quite a stronger sex, due to having stronger bone density, being bigger in size, larger capacity to carry oxygen, as well as just general overall muscular strength. But obviously, like I said, the menstrual cycle is the biggest difference between us. And generally women will have around 457 cycles in their lifetime. So it will take up the majority of their reproductive life. So that could last over 30 years, if not less, or if not more. It just depends based on obviously every individual. So the menstrual cycle can affect us in many different ways. It can have negative and it can have positive effects also. Some of the negative effects are obviously PMS, so we get cramps, obviously the blood flow, headaches, high temperature, but then it also has got quite good positive impacts, as you can actually gain more strength in terms of building more muscle and having less DOMS at certain points of your cycle. And it also can have good impacts in terms of like weight loss, and then for some people who want to gain weight, it can also be positive in terms of that for you. So the menstrual cycle itself is split into 4 different parts. So you have the first part, which is your general period, you have your follicular part, you have your ovulation part, and then you have your luteal phase. And each one of those phases have different positive and negative parts to it. Generally all kind of have more negative, unfortunately, than they do positive, but it's not exactly the best thing every single month when a female gets her period. So in the first phase, this generally lasts between 3 to 7 days. It can vary between individuals. This stage you normally have high levels of estrogen and proestrogen, and during this phase it's generally better for you to do exercise in terms of like trying to boost your mood. As generally women can tend to get quite moody. I myself get very moody during my period, and I definitely don't really want to exercise just due to like pain and other situations, but actually not exercising during this stage is actually quite bad, if that makes sense. Like, because when you exercise and during this stage you have quite a lot of endorphins and serotonin, so what happens is it kind of starts to boost your energy for you. So then in hindsight it's better for you to start doing it, because endorphins can also help to relieve pain. And obviously if you're a female who suffers from really bad cramping or abdominal pains, then actually trying to do a little bit of exercise, not saying like go for a 60-minute run or anything like that, but like doing like a 10-minute walk can actually like be quite beneficial for you. And then after that phase you'll then have your follicular stage. So this kind of starts at the beginning of your period as well. So this will last roughly between 16 days, and this will come just before ovulation. So during this stage, your levels of estrogen and progesterone will generally tend to kind of drop, but this can kind of like slightly vary. For some people it will start to increase rapidly, and this will last for the longest duration of the cycle. And then after that you have obviously ovulation, where you have a few other hormones that then also come into action and will start kind of altering and changing your body. During this stage you generally tend to get quite an increase in body temperature, and you've also got quite a few other physiological changes which we'll go into slightly later. And then your final stage is your luteal stage, and this is where you start to have increases but then massive drops in your hormones as well. And this is when you start to have your PMS kind of symptoms just before your period starts. So generally you'll start to have a lot of bloating, headaches, weight gain, cravings for food, which I know I certainly have sometimes, and then you might start to have trouble sleeping as well. And this will generally last between 11 to 17 days. So kind of like the follicular cycle part, it is quite a long duration, but obviously generally because your periods are 7 days, you'll then have your cycle, which is the full 28 days. So this is where it's just the whole way of life basically for women. So like I said, there are many advantages and disadvantages to the menstrual cycle, especially for some athletes and women who are quite fairly active. If you do overtrain and you are competing constantly and you're doing high endurance, then it actually can completely stop your period from happening. So strenuous exercise constantly is really bad for you in terms of your reproductive cycle. Obviously for some people who don't want to have kids that might be a problem, but then the issue is you still will have the same symptoms, so your hormones will still have the same chain of reaction, you just won't have the blood flow and some other symptoms as well, but the majority of them in terms of your hormones will kind of stay, so you'll have quite a big hormone imbalance. There are many athletes who have said, I've never felt it before, it doesn't affect me while I'm competing, and some women will say the same thing, it's not affected them. Some of the biggest names that have spoken about it is Paula Radcliffe. So she said her menstrual cycle has not affected her at all. She's still competed and made PBs, made world records, and it's just, she's like, yeah, I've not really seen any effects. But then she has then gone and said later on, oh, sometimes I have felt like it's affected me. So it might have been that she was at a different stage of that menstrual cycle. So she might have not necessarily been on her period. She might have been in a different part of it. So then she might have felt the great effects when she's in one section to when she's in the other one. So it's one of those things that there's a lot of information on, but there still isn't in terms of like the different stages and how each of those different stages affect you personally. And affect every female. So it's something that we do need to still kind of understand more and learn a bit more about, but then it's also something that is still widely known about as well. And then you've also got Heather Watson, everyone knows, GB tennis player. So she's actually said she's lost games and she's had to drop out due to having her period, as it has caused her to have a really high temperature, which therefore caused her to get quite dizzy. She felt nauseous and she felt quite fatigued as well. And obviously for athletes and just women in general competing at high levels or just going out, if you're feeling not well, you're not going to want to exercise. In your eyes, exercise is probably the worst thing to do. All I would like to do 9 times out of 10 is just sit down with a nice hot chocolate if it's like a cold day, and then just sit down inside and just watch a film. And then if it's like quite sunny, then I'll just stay outside and I won't really do much. But then you tend to get quite hot flushes. So it's one of them that is like, okay, on the good side, you can have energy boosts, you can have you can become stronger, you can build more muscle. On the downsides is you can have constant pain, really heavy flows, nausea, dizziness. So it's like weighing up the two sometimes for women is like, yeah, there's more negatives than there are positives. So I don't think I am going to exercise. But like I said, there are good things. So as I said before, you have endorphins and serotonin, which are released while you are on your period. And like I said, they help a lot to increase energy, they boost your mood. And obviously when you're in a better mood, you're like, oh my god, yeah, I want to go out, I want to do this 5k, I want to do this 10k, I really want to go to the gym. Or you might just go for a really long walk and you might really enjoy it, and that's great. But it's not always there, and it's trying to figure out at what stage you're at. So you're like, oh, okay, for these days, to say every 28 days, you've got, for the first 5 days, 7 days, I've got my period, I've not got much energy. Okay, that's fine. But then after that, you've got the little stage in between where you've got a big increase in energy because your hormones are starting to like kick in and stuff. So then you're like, okay, let me start doing a little bit of exercise here, I'm feeling really happy, blah, 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 blah. But in certain stages, too many hormones or too many of certain hormones can actually have a detrimental effect to you as a person and as an athlete as well. So generally what happens is there are higher incident rates of musculoskeletal injuries during your menstrual cycle. One of the most commonly known ones is the anterior cruciate ligament. So this is the ligament at the front of your knee. It generally tends to get injured a lot more during the cycle due to a greater exposure to injury. This is due to an increase in ligament laxity, and this is generally caused by higher levels of estrogen, and what they do is they decrease the strength. They decrease the strength of the tendons and the collagen. So then what happens there is normally your ligaments will be quite strong. They kind of try and stop that movement and that traction, along with your tendons obviously coming from your quadriceps. So what can happen is, because the ligament's quite lax, your muscles might not also react as quick. So therefore what will happen is the knee will just kind of keep sliding forward, and unfortunately you can suffer from a tear, or at worst you can suffer from a rupture. And this is quite this is seen quite a lot in terms of change of direction sports. So those are kind of like football, rugby, netball, basketball. It's very, very common. In terms of basketball, it's 3.5 times higher in women to suffer from an ACL injury, particularly when they're on their period, in comparison to male athletes, just in like them in their general form, and it's 2.8 times higher in female footballers. And of course it is quite seen in female football with the whole ACL injuries. You've had quite a few women who have gone down with the same problem. Chloe Kelly unfortunately has now ruptured both her ACLs on both her knees, so unfortunately for her that's quite a big setback. But it's something that we might not actually know whether she was at one of her certain stages that could have caused that big effect, because like we said, there are the different stages. Some are really great and some are really bad. So if she's at that follicular point where you have high levels of estrogen, then that point for her could have been the reason why her ligament ruptured. It could have been because her ligaments were too lax. And it can be the same thing for anyone who's just like walking. You could literally be walking up and down the stairs, you might plant your foot wrong and your weight of your body might just keep going, and unfortunately if you are potentially on that part of your menstrual cycle, you could be at a high risk to sustain that injury. But it is more commonly known in like high intensity sports and stuff like that, so it's not something that you would necessarily have to worry about as much. However, though, there are positive effects of estrogen. So one of the many ones is actually that it can help increase muscular strength, and it can also help to decrease like DOMS and stuff like that. So this generally will happen around the ovulation part of the cycle, and it kind of like so it kind of like helps to kind of like reduce kind of the risk of injury, because you're a lot stronger at that point. So generally around that stage we'd kind of say, okay, maybe it's better for you to go focus on being in a gym, because you can build more muscle, you can lose more weight as well, because during this stage generally your body will start to burn more fat than it will, say, carbohydrates, which can then also cause a few other problems, because you're burning more fat. Yeah, that's great, everyone wants to lose weight, everyone wants to burn fat, but if you're, say, like an endurance runner and you tend to have quite a lot of carbohydrates to give you more energy, you're not really burning it, you're more storing it, and that's where you can have a lot of weight loss, but you can then also have quite a lot of weight gain. So it's one of them when you kind of have to like balance your diet out in that situation, because you don't want to be like, oh okay, I can like start losing weight because all my fat's burning, but then if you're saying, oh okay, so that's happening, I'm going to go out, I'm going to do more, when you do more exercise you then need more energy, you need to then obviously hydrate yourself, you need to eat more. So then in terms of that you're thinking, okay, I'm burning so I can eat more, but you actually can't, because if you're taking in more carbohydrates, like I said, they're just going to keep storing and storing and storing. That's just going to make you keep building up weight. So it's one of them, you kind of have to balance the two. But if you want to build muscle, you want to get lean, that is like the perfect stage to start doing it, because you know you can go to a gym, you can have a really good workout. Yes, you're gonna have still gonna have a little bit of DOMS. It's not gonna completely get rid of it. That's normal. That's how you know you've done a really good exercise or a really good workout. You kind of feel the effects a few days later in your legs or in your arms or in the muscles that you've worked that day. But that normally kind of happens in the later stage of your period. So obviously after you've had your menstrual cycle, so after you've obviously had your period. But unfortunately, like I said before, there's so many like mixed findings between the two, and in terms of methods that they are using to understand what's going on, they don't really pinpoint it as much, if that makes sense. So yes, we know about the 4 different phases, but generally they'll separate it into 2. So you'll have your period, and then you'll have the ovulation. They don't really have the kind of in between, which is, it's like, okay, but they're not the 2 most important parts. Okay, I guess for women, if they are looking to conceive and stuff like that, then that's great for them. But if you're someone who's, say, my age, I'm 23, I'm not looking to have kids anytime soon. So for me, I want to know, okay, this is the best time for me to do this. When's it going to affect me when I go and play sports or when I go for a run? And also, like, when's it going to affect me just day to day in terms of like my moods and when I'm feeling happy and when I'm like energized and stuff like that. I want to know myself if I'm going to be happier or if I'm going to be feeling down, so then I can be like, okay, like I'm going to just avoid doing certain things at that point, and then I can focus more on other things. So you're not completely not doing anything, you're just channeling your energy and your focus into that one part. So obviously, because there are quite a few differences, it's something that we really want to understand a little bit more. And for me, myself, I've suffered with polycystic ovary syndrome. So for me, I have had quite a bad history in terms of my periods and stuff like that. So for me, I really wanted to talk about something like this because it's normally, like I said before, it's such a taboo subject, and there's not many people that are comfortable talking about it and want to like say, okay, this is happening to me. Why is it happening? So for me, when I was competing when I was quite young and doing all my sports, and then my period came quite early when I was a child, but then unfortunately because I was over exercising, I would generally only see my period once every 6 months. And obviously for me that was quite a big thing. I was quite young, I was about 14, 15, and then it would come and I'd be in so much pain, I didn't want to do anything. But then like days afterwards I'd have so much energy and I'd want to do so much. I'm just like, how does this make sense? Like I never really understood it as a child. A child, as a teenager, sorry. So it's like something we know that we need to look at, because obviously everyone's got their own daughters or they've got their wives and they've got their partners and stuff. And if people aren't understanding it, or if we don't understand it ourselves, how can we expect someone else to? So for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to uni, I'm going to do sports therapy because I got injured. To be fair, my injury might have been a result of me being in a certain stage of my menstrual cycle. I'm not entirely sure, but I definitely feel like now learning about it, it probably was because my body was just a lot weaker at that point and I was completely just over exercising and I wasn't at my strongest. But obviously for women we need to make sure that we understand it a lot more, because oh sorry, I just got cut off there. It is going to affect us quite a bit, so obviously it's something that we do want to talk about and we do need to learn about. So in terms of how it will affect us overall, kind of like a bit of a summary. So obviously your period stage, you have estrogen and proestrogen levels are at their lowest. So generally on this time, it's actually best to focus on endurance, so like long distance running, all that kind of stuff, as you do have a little bit more energy but you don't have too much, but then at that point you're not at more of a risk to sustain an injury. And then you have your follicular, so at this point you have higher levels of energy. They start to begin but they're not still as great as before. At this time it is a better risk, a better chance to do, it's at a higher risk to sustain ligament injury, just because you have got those high levels of estrogen coming through. So generally this is when you will generally start to gain weight, just because you're going to start increasing in body mass and just general weight gain. And then you have your, it's not the highest weight, sorry, it's the lowest. Sorry, and then you've got your ovulation phase, and this is the highest time that you are at risk for injury, just because your estrogen levels are higher. So for this one it's definitely important to focus more on building muscle and building strength, as generally this will be where you'll see the better benefits, and then obviously you will start burning more fat at this stage rather than burning everything else. And then you have your luteal stage, which is your final stage, and this is the week before your period generally. So this is where you have the least levels of estrogen, and proestrogen levels will start falling, and then eventually they will just completely deplete. And then at this point then you will start having your PMS symptoms. So this is the best time for you to start losing weight and to start doing high intensity sport. So if you are competing, say in like football, or if you are doing like a CrossFit or something like that, this is the best time to do it, as you are at the least risk of sustaining an injury. But as I said before, make sure that you do not overtrain, because overtraining can also affect your period as well. Obviously this can differ from woman to woman, because not everyone's the same, everyone's hormones affect them differently, and obviously everyone's body is just completely different. So obviously these are like guidelines of kind of when it will happen and the best time to do it, but obviously everyone is slightly different, so it's something that you'd kind of have to track yourself. So what you can do is have a diary, track when you've had your period, track your symptoms throughout your menstrual cycle. So say, okay, I felt like I had a really big boost of energy today, I went for a run and it felt great, or I didn't have like much energy today, I felt really sluggish and I didn't really want to exercise. Track it down, write what day it is, and then what you can do from there is kind of like build a plan over a few months, because within the first, I'd say 1 to 2 to 3 months, you can kind of understand it and see the differences between each month, because obviously every month your period is not going to be the same. It's just how your body reacts, and obviously in terms of environmental factors as well, like the difference in temperature outside can have quite a big difference, and obviously your mental state, your mental health state as well. So it's very important that you kind of focus on other areas as well as just that area. But obviously, like I said, it can have good effects but it can also have negative effects. So if anyone would like to ask any questions, then the time is now, and then I can answer them for you as best as I can. And then if there are any other questions you'd like to ask us personally, then by all means we can answer them as well. So the floor is yours. Okay, so I don't think there are going to be any questions today. Any tips on menopause? I haven't researched that much at the moment. However, that is something that we can actually later on discuss for you. Obviously, that is later on. It's not something I'm experiencing at the moment, or I won't be for quite a while. But I do know there are certain things that do get quite affected. So obviously, heat flushes, hot sweats and like hot flushes are kind of like a big thing. So I think around that, it just depends on how your body kind of reacted throughout your life. So I'd kind of base it on your period slightly, but it's something that I need to do a little bit more research into. So what we might do for that is actually do a live later on, throughout maybe in like a few weeks or something, and then we can talk a bit more into that, so we can research that a bit more, because I've read it a little bit, but I'm not like over highly confident about talking it, so I don't want to say anything that could potentially be wrong. But that is a really good question, and that is something we will look into. So thank you very much for that question, Liz. We will hopefully get back to you soon about that. Sorry about that, my phone's being on a very weird situation at the moment, but obviously that is our time for today. So if anyone is struggling with any injuries, just leave a comment below saying injury, and one of our team will get back to you as soon as possible, and we'll try and see how we can help. And if there, like I said, any other questions you have, please just drop us a message or a direct message as well. Thank you all for joining. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day.